Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Mikah, Sargent, and Jason Howell have a great show planned for you. First, we talk to Geoffrey Fowler of the Washington Post about Apple's newly announced iPhone SE. Trust us, it is not a phone to overlook. Then, TechCrunch's own Amanda Silberling stops by to talk about Meta/Facebook adding parental controls, finally, to its Oculus Quest/Meta Quest headset. That all gets very confusing, but Amanda breaks it down for us. Then, our stories of the week. First, you may have forgotten about Clubhouse, but Russians are actually using the platform to get the news they need and so much more. And then I round things out with my story of the week about how WordPress and Tumblr are striving to keep the internet weird. Thank you, Matt Mullenweg and Automattic, for keeping that going. All of that is coming up on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 226, recorded Thursday, March 17th, 2022. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Progress. Progress has the technology you need to secure, analyze, and integrate your applications, network, and processes. Find out more and download a free trial at progress.com/twit.
And by Collide, get endpoint management that puts the user first. Visit collide.com/twit to learn more and activate a free 14-day trial today. No credit card required.
And by Podium. Join more than 100,000 businesses that already use Podium to streamline their customer interactions. Get started for free at podium.com/twit or sign up for a paid Podium account and get a free credit card reader. Restrictions apply.
Hello, and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah, Sargent.
And I'm the not-so-green guy today, unfortunately, Jason Howell. I wish I had a green jacket. Your jacket is snazzy.
Thank you.
I have to say.
You. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right, let's start things off talking about Apple. This is like the week of Apple reviews.
Yes.
And when I thought about the peak performance event and the reviews that were, kind of streaming in throughout the week, I thought, yes, we're used to hearing about, the M1 Ultra and the Mac Studio and the Studio Display. All those things seem to get a lot of the headlines and a lot of the publicity from the event. But then we also have some other hardware, which I would say in many ways, a device like the iPhone SE is actually pretty darn important in the grand scheme of what Apple's doing. And so today, joining us to talk about his review of the iPhone SE is Geoffrey Fowler from the Washington Post. Welcome back, Geoffrey.
Hello, hello, hello.
It's awesome to get you back. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a while. First of all, before we kind of jump into this, not everybody has $1,000 to spend on a smartphone, even though at this point, this day and age, it feels like all of the premium smartphones, they're $1,000, maybe they're even a little bit more than that. So it's easy in the tech fanatic sphere or the tech journalist sphere to think that those are the phones that matter. But is it safe to say that the iPhone SE is actually really important to what Apple does because of its lower price point? What do you think about that?
Hugely important. So I write for the Washington Post. Most of my readers are not among the tech enthusiast set. They are ordinary folks, people's uncles and aunts and grandmas, all of whom now need a phone to do the things in their life too. And they don't have $1,000 to spend on a new device, or even $1,500 what some of these phones cost now. And they're actually scratching their heads a little bit why they ought to cost that much. We've had smartphones around for well over a decade now, and the price keeps going up on them, even though the innovation and the new stuff that it does for you isn't really going up. As we know, with technology, things should get cheaper over time, right? Because you're able to squeeze the margins, and figure it out. So that's definitely not happening in smartphones. So anytime Apple is willing to put out a device that costs a phone, something as important as an iPhone that costs only $430, that's going to make a big impact on people.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, this year especially, with some of the changes that we're going to talk about in the next few minutes, it's not like this device is a slouch, right? And I mean, and actually this isn't the only example of this, right? Google's been doing this with their Pixel A series, making some pretty formidable phones in this same price category. So I feel like now more than ever, this like $400, $500, $600 price range is more competitive than it's ever been. You're actually getting a very compelling device in that price category, whereas before you might have to make some serious trade-offs, and that seems to be the case here. Where do you stand on the design debate? Because I've seen some people in their reviews say, you know, this is the classic iPhone look, and then others say it's a very dated iPhone look. Where do you stand on that debate?
You know, to me, it looks almost exactly like the iPhone 7. Do you remember the iPhone 7 with that piano black finish that was so smooth and it felt like a pebble in your hand? This is really similar to that. And some people love that. Some people still love the home button. I mean, until earlier this week, it was still the most convenient way to unlock an iPhone while you were wearing a mask.
Yeah, it's true.
So I think there's plenty of reason to like it, and frankly wish that Apple would, you know, use that technology that exists to put the fingerprint reader on your screen to put it into their high-end phones too. So I'm here for the folks that still want a home button and a fingerprint reader. I have to say, for me, as someone who's been using one of the sort of more squared off iPhone designs that we've had since the 12 and the 13, it does feel here in my hand a little bit slippery. Like I found that I kept like, whoops, going out of my hand while I was using it. But, you know, again, that's just something you get used to over time.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people are throwing cases on these devices anyways, so at least that's me. If I don't throw a case on, it's destined to hit the floor. Let's talk a little bit about, I think, one of the biggest upgrades here is the chip inside, which is the same chip that you can find even in the top-of-the-line iPhones, the iPhone 13. How is there, like, I realize it's the same chip, and we get, you know, perhaps the same performance, but when you're talking about a smaller phone that has different, you know, sizes of battery and, you know, is using the device differently on a smaller scale versus the large scale premium device, are you actually getting better performance out of a device of this size? What has been your experience with the chipset? I
haven't found that there's sort of a noticeable difference. I mean, one of the challenges that Apple faces here is they always, you know, really talk up their chip improvements in the iPhone, but for the last couple of generations, it's become really hard for most people to really tell the difference, unless you're doing some very, you know, sort of intense and specific gaming kinds of things. Right. And frankly, that's not what the people who are using or going to buy an iPhone SE are doing. For me, the biggest and most important thing about that chip being in this phone is that means that this phone can last longer. And that's a big key thing for folks who, you know, who this is a strain on their budget to buy a new iPhone. They want one that's going to last them, you know, 5-6 years. And the news here is that this one might, at least in terms of the chip, even if the battery might not last that long. And I know we'll get to the battery in a few minutes. So that to me is the most important part of having that chip.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the battery now, and you actually mention in your article that like replacing that battery even when you get to that point. I mean, it's not that expensive. It's like what, $49, something like that. So the idea of, and mind you, I'm on Android. The idea of having a device, being able to be relatively confident that this thing's going to last you 6 or 7 years. Maybe you spend $49 to replace the battery. Like, I'm pretty jealous of that, to be completely honest. That's pretty great. How does the battery perform?
So this is where we get the sad trombone sound effect of this review. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I had a lot of difficulty getting it to last more than 12 hours.
Ooh.
You know, I'd wake up in the morning and start using the phone, and, you know, not even necessarily that taxing. I know when some reviewers really hammer these phones, you know, that can be sort of an unnatural use experience. So I really kept that in mind with how I was using the phone. You know, FaceTime with mom a little bit, take a couple of photos, answer some emails, but it was usually dead or dying by 6 or 7 p.m. So that is not great. And that's even after Apple says that versus the previous generation of the SE, which came out 2 years ago, they changed the battery chemistry. And of course, that new chip is also supposed to be more power efficient. Now, Apple claims that it will last It'll go 2 hours longer than the previous generation SE, which was also known to be kind of a disappointing battery life phone. I think it's really, really, really going to depend a lot on the 5G coverage in your neighborhood. I live in the middle of San Francisco, and I have AT&T service on this phone, and AT&T's 5G service in the middle of San Francisco is terrible. So I think one of the things that's going on with the poor battery life on this phone is that it has to use more power to try to reach that signal, when I make a phone call to somebody, and that is draining the power faster throughout the day. The problem is lots of Americans are in the exact same position as I am, that they don't have good 5G coverage where they are. And so it is going to be a drain on the phone, even though Apple has put some technology into iOS that supposedly should like switch off the 5G when it's not useful for you. I just didn't find that it was helping me here.
Interesting. Yeah, that's important to know. Although, nice to know that this device actually does support 5G. But as with anything with 5G, really, it has yet to be proven to be anything more than your results, may vary. Your mileage may vary. You really never know kind of what kind of coverage you're going to have wherever you happen to be, how your device actually manages that. And I know this device doesn't support all bands of 5G, right?
That's correct. After any Apple product launch, I feel like one thing that journalists do and can do to be of service is to say, like, okay, the things that they didn't mention, and you need to understand them as well. And one of the things that Apple didn't mention is that this device does not support millimeter waves. So that's the fastest band that particularly Verizon has really invested a lot in. So it can't connect to that. But frankly, so far, that's in busy downtown corridors and stadiums and that kind of stuff, and so of no use to me here. Another thing that they didn't mention is that although this phone has access to most of the same photo processing capabilities as the top of the line iPhone 13, it doesn't have access to what's the most important one, and that's night mode. So the camera on this phone can feel very dated and very limited as soon as you get in slightly dark situations. Yeah,
that's a challenge. We've gotten very used to these like really powerful night modes, really kind of solving this legacy issue of low light mode, and it's just gotten so much better and so much better. So it's hard to step back when you don't have that. Overall verdict, obviously this is the right phone for a certain user. What's your verdict on this?
Yeah, if you have low expectations and low needs for what you're going to use a phone for, then you're going to meet them with this phone, and you should go ahead and buy it. But you should go in knowing what it is that you're not going to get. And if you don't care about those things, if you're actually one of these people that turns off their phone during the day when they're not using it, I know a lot of folks do that, then great. The battery life won't be a problem. If you're not, trying to be Ansel Adams, taking cool night photos, you're gonna be just fine. But you should definitely know what you're not getting, and also what the trade-offs come from sort of furthering yourself in that Apple ecosystem, because the phone itself might cost $429, but Apple now has more and more ways to try to extract money out of you for services, including ads that litter, all over the iOS screens for things like iCloud and Apple News and all these other sorts of things, so they can make money from you.
Yep. Yes, indeed. I get more and more used to things like that. So, well, thank you for hopping on with us today, Geoffrey Fowler. Always have a lot of fun talking with you, and I really enjoy your work on the Washington Post. So everybody should read it, WashingtonPost.com. If people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Geoffrey Fowler with a G like the giraffe from Toys R Us of our youth.
If you can remember Toys R Us at this point.
Fondly.
I do. I'll never forget.
Fondly.
Yes, fondly. Exactly.
I used to have a Geoffrey the Giraffe mascot.
Right on. Thank you.
Now you got me.
Now I got you.
There you go. Thank you so much again. We'll talk with you soon. Take care.
Take care.
All right, coming up, parental controls finally coming to Meta.
Finally.
VR. Long awaited there. So we're going to talk all about that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Progress. Progress has been enabling enterprise experiences for decades. They've assembled the technologies that are going to empower businesses to thrive in a post-COVID world, which is kind of where we are right now. Most companies don't have the resources to invest in technology as digital Goliaths do. They need to use technology to create differentiation with a smaller investment. They can achieve this actually by turning to our sponsor Progress as their trusted provider. With Progress, any organization can achieve the level of differentiation that is critical in today's business environment. So whether you happen to be an IT professional who's concerned about networking and infrastructure, security, compliance, maybe enabling web and digital experiences, all those things, Progress has a solution for you. And they've got a bunch of solutions to choose from, actually. Move It Managed File Transfer is just one of those. It provides control, security, and visibility over all file transfer activities. So transferring confidential data, as you know, through insecure channels, that actually opens up an organization to all sorts of liabilities. With a managed file transfer solution, you can actually gain insight into who has access to all those files, so you know who's getting at them, if that file was accessed, and when it was accessed. That's a lot of granular detail that you now have access to. There's WhatsUp Gold Network Monitoring, which allows you to monitor networks, applications, and devices, both in the cloud, of course, and on premises. Kemp LoadMaster Load Balancer. This is a next-generation load balancing and application delivery solution for private, public, and hybrid cloud. So many to choose from. Flowmon Network Intelligence. It's a network performance monitoring and network detection and response solution. And then finally, want to mention Sitefinity Digital Experience Platform. This is for building digital experiences across channels that improve business agility. They also happen to foster personal relationships with visitors. Progress is awesome. You got to check it out. Progress has the technology that you need to secure, analyze, and integrate your applications, your network, and your processes. Find out more and download a free trial at progress.com/twit. Don't miss out. Visit progress.com/twit, and you'll get your very own Progress swag bag in the process. And we thank Progress for their support of Tech News Weekly.
All right, back from break, and now it is time to talk about the Meta Quest. So let me start by laying out the basics here. When we're talking about Meta, we're talking about that company that used to be called Facebook. When we're talking about the Meta Quest, we're talking about the Oculus Quest that is now called the Meta Quest. So I just want to get that out of the way for all of you listening out there.
I'm a little dizzy.
Yeah, we all are. And it's not because of VR that we're dizzy.
Right.
So, Meta has released I guess even before Meta purchased Oculus and acquired that company. The Oculus Quest has obviously been out for a long time in different iterations, but the company is just now adding some parental supervision tools. Joining us today to talk about it is Amanda Silberling from TechCrunch. Thank you for being on the show, Amanda.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so happy to have you here. And also, that is an excellent sweater you have, just as a side
Thank
note.
you.
I kind of want it. Anyway, so let's get into
We can talk
things.
about that later.
Okay, cool. I can ask, I got to figure out where you got it. So anyway, let's start by talking about what was available to kind of give parents the ability to decide what kids could view or access on the platform. Before we talk about the new tools, I'm curious, what tools have been available up to this point to either keep kids from accessing certain things or just in general, some privacy and security tools on the platform?
Yeah, so I think something that's really shocking about this story is that before this week, the Quest didn't really have parental controls. I actually came across a life hacker article that came out this week that was like how you can change your router settings to sort of like try to have some control over what apps your children are using. But like the average parent is not going to do that. But now Meta's rolling out ways for parents to more easily monitor what their children are doing in their VR headsets. But before that, they had some general safety features that are not really child specific, but just things like there's boundaries you set to make sure that while you're like in the heat of the moment playing VR ping pong, you don't accidentally like hit your TV with your controller or something. And I think those are really helpful just for like physical safety, but I think that Meta has a lot of responsibility when it comes to online safety and preventing harassment and giving users more security. And I think there is a lot of pressure on them to do a good job at that. And rolling out parental controls about 2 years, more than 2 years after initially launching their Quest headsets is a little concerning.
Yeah, absolutely. I think concerning for all of us. Now, I found it interesting in your piece, you kind of touch on the overall popularity of the Meta Quest in particular. But I think that for some, they still see VR as it's a future technology. It's not a technology that people care about right now. So maybe they're a little bit surprised to hear that U.S. lawmakers and UK ruling groups are paying attention to this device at all, are paying attention to the parental controls that are involved with this device, and whether or not this the platform itself violates any of the rules and protections that are in place, especially for children. I am curious, based on what you wrote about, is this a popular product at this point? Can you sort of reassure the people out there who may be going, isn't this still kind of obscure, that maybe that's not the case? What did you find in learning about the sales of the Oculus Quest, or excuse me, the Meta Quest?
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with how they're rebranding literally everything. But yeah, another reporter at TechCrunch, Sarah Perez, found that based on data from mobile app researchers, it appeared that the Oculus, which is still called the Oculus app, the Oculus companion app to the Quest, was downloaded about 2 million times in the 2 weeks between Christmas and beginning of January. And in that 2-week period, 2 million downloads kind of equates to, like, if you're downloading the Oculus Quest app, like, app downloads aren't always the most useful metric, but I think that's a way of helping us kind of estimate the sales, because generally you're going to want to use the app if you have a Quest, because it just makes it easier to, like, download apps without going into your headset. But so I think it is more popular than people might think. And I think it's only going to continue growing in popularity, especially now that I think the price point on some of this hardware is becoming more accessible. Like, the Quest 2 is priced pretty similarly to something like a Nintendo Switch. And I think people want to see what all the fuss is about. Is this technology really that good that Facebook is going to change their name over it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to wonder what the fuss is about if they go that far with it. So let's talk about one of the sort of systems that they've announced, or features that they've announced, called Family Center. What tools or resources does Family Center provide for parents or guardians?
So Family Center is still something that is rolling out across various Meta platforms, but right now it's going to be available on Instagram. And if parents go on the Instagram app and go into their settings, there should be something called Supervision, I believe, and that will help them stay aware of, like, how much time their child is on Instagram, setting time limits for how long they can be on Instagram, if their teen has reported somebody, who's following them, who are they following. And I think something that's also key is that these features are double opt-in. Like, the teen has to invite the parent to have this access, which, I mean, I think that is a conversation that teens and parents should be having together. But so I think that's interesting to me too, as part of it. But that Family Center hasn't rolled out across other apps that Meta owns. So like Facebook, the Quest, WhatsApp, but it should be rolling out to more Facebook Meta properties soon. But of course, we don't really know what that means when they say soon. It could mean a couple months. It could mean who knows.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as you note in your piece, and you mentioned it there briefly, it kind of was a good move by Meta to put these parental controls into the mobile app versus having these controls in the headset itself, because already asking someone to strap on a headset adds a level of friction that some people just aren't going to go through with at that point. To have to put it on, to figure out how do these controls work, to sort of disorient themselves, take themselves out of their reality. And so there does seem to be some level of awareness on Meta's part to say, if we want parents to have access to these tools, or guardians to have access to these tools, and we want them to be able to use them, we probably should make them available to them without having to use this newfangled technology that their child or the person they're watching over is using. So I'm curious, do you think that Meta is learning from its experiences with Instagram in particular about kind of how it has handled things so far with the talking to legislators about how Instagram does or does not affect kids? I mean, does this look like a company that is now paying more attention to the way that it is making these tools available? Is this a response to some of the blowback it's received with Instagram in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that they're learning, and I'm personally really interested in seeing how they manage content moderation on their apps like Horizon Worlds and Horizon Venues as the Quest becomes a more popular piece of hardware. And it's hard to say if they've learned from recent news and their recent constant stream of Senate hearings. But something that even sticks out to me from then is when the head of Instagram, Adam Mosseri, testified before the Senate, and a safety feature that Instagram had added was something where, like, when a teenager opens an account, then their account is by default set to private. And it was actually like a senator whose office uncovered in research that if you set up a teenager's account on the web, then it doesn't default to private. And things like that just feel like really glaring oversights that a company with so many resources can't really afford to be making. Mm-hmm. And I worry that, are they investing in safety because they're trying to save face, or because they're really thinking about the best ways to keep users safe? I don't think we can really know the answer to that question, but I just hope that as people interact in VR and explore new ways of experiencing the internet and connecting with each other, that they're genuinely thinking about safety while they're developing new products.
Yes. Speaking of new ways to connect with people and new products from Meta, I was hoping you could tell our listeners a little bit about Horizon Worlds and Horizon Venues. Just what are these apps, and are children able to use those two apps if they have a Meta Quest?
Yeah, so Horizon Worlds is a social VR app. It's like you have your avatar. They don't have legs. That's just just happens. You just lose your legs. It's fine. And you go into user created worlds. Users can build, like, maybe you want to build a bowling alley or like a cafe, and you can go into these different rooms and you're interacting with real human beings who you see their avatar, but you can talk to them. Like, it's a very immersive experience compared to something like playing Club Penguin, for example. That's a throwback. But I think, like, it does make a difference when you're experiencing this, like, in an immersive, environment. But so Horizon Venues is similar, but it's more like time-based events. But then they also have things like you can go into Horizon Venues and you land in a thing that kind of looks like a movie theater, and you can go into the different doors. And so when I last used it, there was a Billie Eilish concert going on. So went to the VR Billie Eilish concert, but found it to be kind of like a pixelated rendering of Billie Eilish performing. And then you're kind of just walking around and there's people in the stands. And like, I think it's a really cool concept, but I just don't think it's really being used in a particularly interesting way yet. Yeah. Like, there was a Foo Fighters concert, and it apparently was really hard for people to actually, like, access the app because it was overloaded maybe. But children in theory aren't supposed to be on these apps. These are 18 and over apps, but it's very easy. Like if a parent owns a headset and they have it connected to their Facebook account, which is somebody who's over the age of 18, and then a child goes on and they take the headset, like so many of the reviews of these apps in the App Store are people being like, I'm getting chased around by screaming children.
I have to attest, I tried out Horizon Worlds while it was still in beta. I got beta access to it, and I went into the main area and I was walking around and I watched this individual who very much sounded and behaved like a small child, literally chasing people around going, hi, 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 just over and over and over again. And I had a laugh. Too. I had a laugh because, it wasn't affecting me, but there were people in there kind of, I heard one person using all these buzzwords about startups and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, they're practically having a business interaction over here. And this kid's just going, hi, hi, hi. So it's clear that, kids are still able to access this, even if there's that 18 limit on that. Is Facebook or is Meta addressing that in any way? Is there some way to fix that problem?
Yeah. So when they rolled out these announcements about changes that they're going to make in the Quest to make it safer for children, that's something I asked them about. Is you have this existing reported issue of children in Horizon Worlds and Horizon venues. Like, what kinds of protections are there going to be to make sure that kids aren't going into apps that they're not supposed to be in? And they responded like mentioning one of the upcoming features where parents can like lock certain apps on the Quest. So like you have to enter a passcode to get in through a gesture. And if the kid doesn't know that gesture, they can't get in. But then you're putting a lot of onus on the parent to be like, I know what Horizon Worlds is. I know why my child shouldn't be going on it. And like, I think it's just very easy to get around things like that on the internet. Like, it's kind of the same as like, just because a fan forum might be 13 and over, that doesn't mean that an 11-year-old can't do some workarounds to get on it. And I think it is hard to prevent these workarounds, but I don't know if these new features are really going to prevent kids from getting on Horizon World.
All right. One final question for you here. When should folks expect to see these parental controls rolling out? And is the Family Center portion already available for folks to use?
The Family Center is going to be available on Instagram currently, but it hasn't rolled out yet across other apps. And right now in the Quest in particular, Meta did say that in April is when they're going to roll out the feature where you can lock certain apps. And so like if you have a child using a headset that adults also use, it's not like the entire thing is like child-proof. Mm-hmm. Like you can still have like adults use Horizon Worlds if they want to, but then lock it so that the kid can't get in. And there's some other features like the Oculus app-based features for parental supervision. Meta said will be rolling out more like over the summer or like in May. But these are all just estimates that they're giving. They're just kind of alerting us to what they're working on and what users can expect in the future. And yeah, I think the sooner the better for these safety features.
Absolutely. Amanda, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to chat with us. Of course, folks can head to techcrunch.com to check out your work. But if they want to follow you online, where should they go to do so?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at @silbwrites, like A as in Amanda, Silb as in the first four letters of my last name, and writes, like writing, which is what I do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Up next, remember Clubhouse? Russia does. We'll talk about that momentarily. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Collide. Collide is a new take on endpoint management that asks the question, how can we get end users more involved? This is in contrast to old school device management tools like MDM, which locks down your employee's device without considering their needs or even attempting to educate them about the security of their laptop. To not know what is actually happening to the computer that you're supposed to be using, just doing all of these things and not explaining it to that end user, that can kind of result in a little bit of friction between the two, where the person is trying to sort of circumvent those tools. Collide is built by like-minded security practitioners who saw just how much MDM was disrupting their end users. It gets so frustrating that they would throw up their hands and they would just switch to using their personal laptops without telling anyone. And if you are hearing that as an IT member, you're probably just getting chills because you know that in that scenario, everyone loses. Collide, on the other hand, is different. This is such a cool idea. I remember hearing that they're going to be a sponsor on the network and starting to read about Collide, and I thought, how had no one thought of this before? I'm so glad Collide did. Instead of locking down a device, Collide takes a user-focused approach that communicates security recommendations to your employees. And where do they do it? Directly on Slack. After Collide is set up, device security turns from a black and white state into a dynamic conversation. The conversation starts with the end users installing the endpoint agent on their own, so they are part of that process, that active process, and then takes you through a guided process that happens right inside their first Slack message. From there, Collide regularly sends employees recommendations when their device is in an insecure state. This can range from simple problems like, hey, the screen lock hasn't been set correctly, to hard to solve and nuanced issues like asking people to secure two-factor backup codes that are sitting in their download folder properly. So you can imagine, you sign up for a new service and your boss told you got to use two-factor authentication. You do that, and then the two-factor authentication process says, hey, download these backup codes that you can use. But you didn't go farther than just leaving them in your downloads folder where they should not be. Collide can let that person know, let's fix this up, let's make it a little better. And because it's talking directly to the employees, Collide is educating them about the company's policies and how to best keep their devices secure using real, tangible examples, not those theoretical scenarios you have to sit through in the video where it's going, Stevenson has a computer without a password. And here is what happened. No, it's none of that. It's the actual stuff that's happening on their device. And this is, as an aside, I love this because that also means that the employee is getting a little bit of understanding and teaching about the security of their devices, even in a personal way. So even outside of what the company's policies are, it starts to get them to think about their own personal security and safety with their devices. Like, this is a win-win-win-win. However many wins I can say, it's all of those. Collide, it's a cross-platform endpoint management. It's for Linux, it's for Mac, and it's for Windows devices that puts end users first for teams that Slack. You can get endpoint management that puts the user first by visiting collide.com/twit to learn more and activate a free 14-day trial today with no credit card required. Visit kolide.com/twit today. And thank you to Collide for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. Man, go check it out. Why not? No risk there with that no credit card required trial. Go get Collide. Collide.com/twit.
All right, let's do this. Stories of the week time. I thought this was a little interesting. You remember Clubhouse? You
sort of.
Ever use it?
I not actively, sort of passively. You popped into it, heard people talking, didn't care, left it.
Yeah. And then not anytime since. I've got it installed on my phone. It's in my little folder of like social media apps.
The apps that are all about just FOMO sign up.
Yeah, right.
You just want to make sure you're there.
I've got to have my user ID
exactly.
there too.
That's the only thing.
Yeah. I've checked out it, a handful of times. Never really found anything that totally captivated me, so I haven't used it very much. Not only that, a whole lot of other apps basically rolled out similar functionality, right? Mm-hmm. So you can get it in many different places. There are Clubhouse clones galore. Clubhouse kind of got lost in the shuffle when that started to happen, especially. Well, it turns out that isn't a total liability. For Clubhouse, and for Russians who are looking for a place to basically talk, against their country's invasion of Ukraine. In the past few weeks, we've talked a lot on this network, on this show even, but definitely on the TWiT network about the impacts of the war between Russia and Ukraine on, all facets of technology, but especially on how it's impacting social media and the internet at large. Well, Russia has been scrambling to shut down access in a number of different ways in its country on all the major social media players out there. They blocked Instagram and Facebook, calling Meta, going as far as calling Meta an extremist organization. They've suspended TikTok because apparently there was too much truth there. Twitter was fully blocked in the country, even though Russian officials have actually been using it to spread their own propaganda. But as we know, speech finds a way, right? It should come as no surprise then that that Clubhouse is now suddenly relevant again, because it turns out it's obscure enough that Russia hasn't, at least not yet, hasn't actually directed its focus on it. And that obscurity, which, Clubhouse probably for a while anyways has considered a liability, turns into an asset, on both sides of the equation. It turns out as many as 700,000 daily rooms are created on Clubhouse. Many of those actually have Russian citizens who are actually communicating openly about the conflict, well, as openly as they can, right? They have to kind of disguise themselves. There's certain words that they can't say or don't want to say, because if they do, there's the potential that they'll be caught, saying something against the government, which I'll talk about in a second. It's this fake news law that Russian citizens are now under the guise of. I think a couple of weeks ago, Russia kind of implemented this fake news law to basically say, if you're caught discrediting the military or in any way, that's considered fake news. You're punished with up to 15 years in prison if that happens.
God.
Which is insanity. So if a citizen doesn't actually agree with the war that their country is waging, and by the way, there are a lot of Russian citizens who feel that way, they talk about that, they're deemed as spreading that fake news in the country. They can go to prison for 15 years. Pretty crazy. So Clubhouse, at least for the time being right now, appears to be off that radar of Russia, thankfully. And, in a time where many happen to be, we talked about it on this show, we're constantly talking about, the dangers of social media. How is social media changing the fabric of society, blah, blah, blah. Here's at least a prime example of how it can be a huge benefit, right? It actually gives them agency. It gives them the ability to speak and to spread their message. The article that I read to kind of understand all of this is an Input Mag article. So I definitely encourage everyone to go read it. But the article itself used fake names. No one wanted to kind of go on record with their real names, of course. They didn't want things to be trackable back to them. They were very careful about any sort of personal potential identifiers for those obvious reasons. But it cites a Russian citizen whose fake name is Mikah, who says her purpose is to illustrate a nation shouldn't be discriminated against, right? Like this nation doesn't necessarily, what the nation is doing doesn't represent what the citizens want, right? That can be easily forgotten. The citizens don't actually agree with what's going on. Mikah says, I consider myself a citizen of the world, not just Russian. And, a part of that connection is made through social media, right? That's kind of how that connection is made outside of where Mikah is and out into the greater world. It is social media. So Mikah is not only speaking about the conflict from inside the country, but also collecting offers apparently and opportunities to one day leave Russia. Probably not alone there, because then if you're communicating on platforms like this, you have a lot of people outside of the country who want to help, because they're like, what can we do? What can we do to reach across and help you out? So I imagine Mikah is not alone in that. She also mentions that it's possible interviews like hers that could possibly make Clubhouse the next target, right? Which obviously any sort of attention could possibly make that happen. But she also just says, I'll use a VPN. We will find a way. We'll figure out how to get this word out there. But anyways, I read the article. I thought it was interesting that we're so used to to having an idea of what the end game is, or what the, it's like we'd already, in my mind, I had already kind of signed Clubhouse off.
Yeah.
And stopped thinking about it.
Right.
And it turns out that was actually a benefit to people in Russia who want to communicate and be heard. And that's awesome. Like, what a great opportunity.
How different people are using these tools, where it may not be something that you found value, but the value was there.
But the value was found somewhere. Yeah.
And I think that that's part of any startup's hope, or any app maker's hope, is that they will find a base. And if that base changes over time, then that's a good thing, as long as there is a base there. And so in this case, I'm glad that that tool is available and has not been shut down like so much other stuff has been shut down in the country. I mean, we heard about Russia working up a plan to basically cut itself off from the rest of the internet, and to have that only be internet internally, which is terrifying. So giving anyone access, in this case with a forgotten app for most of us in the US, I'm glad that it's there. I'm glad that it's there to do that.
Yeah, and it's not only acting as a way for Russian citizens who don't agree with the war to get that message out, it's also an opportunity for Russian citizens who might be under the, not the spell, but under the word of the propaganda that's being played inside of the country, to get word from outside, even from Ukrainian citizens who are on the other side of the conflict, to kind of share, their perspectives and hopefully think a little more critically about what's happening.
Yeah.
Because I can only imagine what it's like to be in a controlled environment like that, where the only message you're getting through any sort of medium is the state-sponsored message. And
that's tough. And so I'm glad that, there is this opportunity to have exposure elsewhere.
Yeah.
We hope that they take that opportunity to be exposed to these differing viewpoints.
Yeah, no question. So anyways, cool perspective on Clubhouse. Don't write it off quite yet. It's getting used in some very important ways right now.
Very cool.
Yeah. All right, coming up next, your story of the week has to do with WordPress and the impacts that WordPress has in so many different ways on the internet as well. It's everywhere. We're going to talk about that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Podium. If you own a business, you already know there aren't enough hours in the day, right? To waste, time playing phone tag. The list of customers that you actually need to reach doesn't get any shorter, of course, especially when business is going good, and that's what you want. That's why local businesses everywhere turn to Podium. Podium makes every interaction as easy as sending a text, because let's face it, sending a text, it's ubiquitous, right? Everybody sends, receives. It's also really responsive. Like when I get a text message, I might get notifications from different apps on my device. I bypass those. But if I get a text message, guaranteed, I'm looking at my phone. I want to know what that is, because there's a certain urgency, there's certain impact that SMS and text messages bring. So in this context, it means that everything in your business gets done even faster. Podium isn't just a better way to communicate. It's a better way to do everything. Gathering reviews, do it through a text message. Collecting payments, you can do that through a text message. Even marketing to your customers. So I've certainly experienced it. We've heard Leo on his shows, talk about walking out of the ice cream shop and getting the message that's like, hey, here's a 20% off for your next time. And who isn't going to take the ice cream shop up on a 20% discount? And you've got it just hanging out in your text roll. So Podium makes it all as easy as pressing send. You won't just free up your time. You're going to grow your business and get more done. With Podium, you'll close deals with customers before the competition even has a chance to call them back. So join more than 100,000 businesses that already use Podium to streamline their customer interactions. Get started for free. All you have to do is go to podium.com/twit, or you can sign up for a paid Podium account and get a free credit card reader. Restrictions do apply. That's podium.com/twit. And we thank Podium for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, WordPress. It's everywhere, even if you don't realize it's everywhere. Even if you don't realize you're on a WordPress site, oftentimes you are.
Yeah, so I often talk about how, and explain to people they don't realize about how Amazon is with AWS is the backbone of a lot of the internet, that AWS plays a role in a lot of the modern internet. A lot of the apps and services that we use rely on AWS, Amazon Web Services in some way. But what people might not know is just how much of the web runs on WordPress. WordPress's CMS system, because it's important to kind of break it up between these different things, has 43% of all websites on the internet. 43% of all websites.
That's insanity. That's crazy.
Like what? It makes I can't even fathom with as big as the web is that WordPress runs 43% of the web. And part of that is because it is an open source tool at its heart. But this story is actually, it's a podcast, but what I love is that the Verge will take some of its podcasts and will turn them into kind of long form articles that are transcripts. And so Nilay Patel sat down with WordPress's Matt Mullenweg, who's actually the CEO of Automattic, which is the company that owns WordPress.com and Tumblr, and kind of is talking about in this piece how they see the web and how they are striving to keep the web kind of weird. I had talked before about Tumblr and how it got a subscription model. It is through Automattic that it got this subscription model to take the ads away. And I really do have faith in Matt Mullenweg's vision and Automattic's vision for the future of Tumblr that will not be what it is right now when it comes to just kind of being a bit of a laughingstock in terms of the terrible, horrible, no good ads that are on the platform. Close to my heart is an acquisition from Automattic for Pocket Casts. Good friends with the original co-founder of the company, Russell Ivanovich, who was like the iOS developer for Pocket Casts and, built the app in the first place for iOS. And then his co-founder built the Android version when it first came out. And it was at one point, Pocket Casts was owned by kind of a group of public radio stations, and they ended up selling it to Automattic, who now owns Pocket Casts. So Automattic is kind of a big company, given that it owns WordPress, it owns Tumblr. In the piece, they talk about some of the big companies, WordPress.com, WooCommerce, and then WordPress VIP. So WooCommerce is this open source platform that's like Shopify. So Shopify, people may be more familiar with because they may have seen it before. It's sort of a content management platform that lets people sell stuff on their sites. WooCommerce does that, but it does it from an open source perspective and helps people to install tools to help them sell and to track and to do all of that kind of stuff that's involved with online commerce, with e-commerce. WordPress.com is the place you go to be able to create a WordPress site and have it all kind of managed in one place. Because anyone can go, the WordPress Foundation is the one that makes WordPress available for free as an open source tool, where someone can go to the WordPress Foundation and download WordPress and then upload it on their own server and create their own WordPress site there. A lot of servers also, if I went to Linode, for example, which is has been a sponsor on the network, just as a note, I could create a WordPress site using Linode because that is an open source library that's available to me. But there's an easy way of doing all of that, which is by going to WordPress.com and paying a monthly fee, and then you can have a site. And what's good about that way is that you are getting a site that's automatically updated, is incredibly secure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's interesting and what I did not know is that WordPress VIP, which is its enterprise version of WordPress.com, is actually the backbone for some pretty big sites. One of those is TechCrunch. We just talked to a journalist from TechCrunch. TechCrunch's site actually runs on WordPress. So that was something new to me, WordPress VIP.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
And then another one you may have heard of, which is whitehouse.gov.
Huh.
WordPress VIP site that runs there. So they do have some huge clients. And, that's what Matt Mullenweg is saying is like, we can host any size of WordPress that you can imagine and make it super secure, because in that way, you will always have the latest updates versus when Steve Gibson on Security Now is talking about how there's a WordPress hack or whatever, it tends to be for outdated versions of WordPress for folks who are hosting their own version of WordPress who haven't updated to the latest version, et cetera, et cetera. They have about, I think it was it 2,000? Yeah, they've got 2,000 employees total. They hired about 700 people last year. And what's kind of cool is that Automattic has people all over the world, which you can do whenever you're kind of a distributed company like this. And something that's kind of unique about the company in being able to bring in these diverse viewpoints, these diverse folks, is that they do something called global pay, which a lot of companies, what they will do is there will be tasks or projects or things that the company wants to do, and they want to do it without having to pay the cost that it would take for hiring someone in the US. And so they will look elsewhere and pay that person quite a bit less money in order to save money. Automattic has a global fee structure where it is going to be more in line, the pay, so that the pay range is similar for salaries, et cetera, which I thought was a really cool thing. That's going to recruit more people wanting to join the company. But all of this, the big kind of conversation here is just about how Automattic is kind of climbing forward and continuing to grow and what it's doing. But they also talk about, and I thought this was kind of interesting, they also have the conversation of Web3. And that's this whole idea that the future of the web is based on the crypto and the blockchain and blah, 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 blah.
Decentralized.
Yeah, decentralized. And I thought that this was, I'm trying to find the response here. We're all in the midst of what some people call a shift to Web3. I feel like you might have many thoughts about the idea that there's another version of the web coming along. Are you in it? Do you own any blockchain securities? Do you have laser eyes? What's the situation? That's what Nilay Patel asked. Nilay said, Matt responded to say, I'm always playing with new technology because that's just what I do for fun. Tried everything. It's fun to talk about and debate, what is Web3? This isn't Web3. This is Web2, et cetera. And what he says is Web 2 was actually totally open, and it had all of these different tools. It was all interoperable and had tagging and open content. Then these other things replaced it, these closed social networks. But Matt Mullenweg says, what's cool to me is the thing we're calling Web 3 is actually exactly what we call Web 2, but it's using similar technologies. Blockchain is not right for everything, but it is right in some cases. And then he goes on to talk about the big thing, which is that all of these technologies are open source, and that is kind of the big conversation there. That it's that this idea that decentralized and all of these different ways of doing it, that all is built on this open source software idea that has existed for a lot longer than any of these new technologies. So this is an incredibly, incredibly long interview that is so well worth the read, particularly if you're a fan of any of these apps or services, if you like Tumblr, if you like WordPress, if you want to hear about the future of that, if you love Pocket Casts as I do. All of those things are covered in this really interesting interview, and it's interesting hearing Matt Mullenweg talk about his vision for the future of the web, but also kind of what Automattic is doing in particular when it comes to how it's going to keep the internet kind of going on and still being this platform that anyone can create a site if they want to and put stuff out there, and that it doesn't close things off to these kind of different groups as it does now with these closed services and sites. So yeah, check that out. It's on The Verge. Whether you want to listen to it via the Decoder podcast or read through the transcript, both ways are Interesting.
Yeah, talk about somebody in Silicon Valley at large who is very influential that you don't hear about nearly as much as you hear about the Dorseys and the Zuckerbergs and everything. I mean, obviously, why is that actually, now that I think about it? Because if WordPress is so dominant in that way, and literally the backbone of the web in many cases, why is the Mullenweg not as known?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I would argue that part of it is because there's a difference between WordPress.com, which he founded, versus WordPress, the open source tool that is run by the open source WordPress Foundation. So in that way, it's like if you're going to talk about what WordPress is, you'd have to talk about everybody that's part of the WordPress Foundation, and so then it stops being kind of a single person. But arguably, with the head of Automattic and WordPress.com, like, that's a big guy.
Yeah, he's a big player.
Big player.
Should also mention that the folks at Floss did an interview with Matt Mullenweg just on March 9th, actually, so like a week and a half ago. So if you go to twit.tv/Floss, you can find our interview with Matt as well. So this is like a Matt Mullenweg double dose.
There you go.
Interview. You get the comprehensive.
Maybe we'll have Matt on Tech News Weekly sometime.
Yes, the triple threat at that point. Right on. Cool. Check it out. And big time influence. That's what his work has been very important. That has proven to be true. We've reached the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. Thank you so much for watching and listening. You can always find the show every Thursday. We do it Thursday morning, publishes usually late in the afternoon on Thursdays. But if you go to twit.tv/TNW, there you can find all the ways to subscribe to the podcast in RSS formats, different podcatchers. Jump out to YouTube, subscribe there so you don't have to wait any longer than that.
If you'd like to get all of our shows ad-free, you should check out TWiT, because that's how you can get all of our shows ad-free.
That's the way.
Twit.tv/TWiT is how you do that. For $7 a month, you get every single one of TWiT shows with no ads. You get access to the exclusive TWiT Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else, including my conversation this morning with Patrick Delahanty. We spent about an hour talking about Patrick, what he does at TWiT, how he got to where he is today, the most complicated projects he's worked on for TWiT, the stuff he's most proud about, and then also asked him some fun random questions from my favorite random icebreaker generator site. So that was a lot of fun. All good stuff, and you get that as part of the TWiT Plus feed. And some of you may have tuned in this morning on the Club TWiT Discord server. That is the place where you can chat with your fellow Club TWiT members and those of us here at TWiT. All of that's available at twit.tv/clubtwit, $7 a month. Your support means the world to us. It means we can buy a new pop filter to replace this smelly one. And so we thank you so much for that. You can also subscribe to individual shows if you'd like on Apple Podcasts. You just find the audio version of the show in Apple Podcasts. So in this case, you'd launch Apple Podcasts, you'd type in Tech News Weekly, you'd find the audio version of the show, and there's a button you can tap or click, depending on where you're looking at it, to subscribe for $2.99 a month. That gets you the ad-free version of the audio feed. If you'd like to tweet at me or follow me on social media, I am at Mikah Sargent on most places, or you can head to chihuahua.coffee, CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. Catch me later this week on The Tech Guy on Saturdays with Leo Laporte, where we take questions from all around the world, from you out there for the radio show, and try to help you with your problems. Except if they're about printers, then we try to avoid those ones. You can also catch me on Tuesday for iOS Today, which I record with Rosemary Orchard. So please check that out too. Jason Howell, what about you?
Just find me on All About Android, twit.tv/AAA. Actually, this upcoming Tuesday, I just heard this morning from Father Robert Balaser. He's in town, so he's going to come into the studio to be on All About Android, and I'm really looking forward to that. It's been a while since I've seen him in person, so I'll look forward to that next Tuesday. You can find me on Twitter at Jason Howell, and I'm just now discovering the awesomeness of icebreaker question sites.
Icebreaker.io is the one I use. Icebreaker.io. There's a pro tip for everybody, because I
we go.
I have to, every other week for the Clockwise podcast, I have to do a non-tech question. And so I use that site for inspiration. Sometimes there'll be one that I'm like, oh, but I just change it a little bit.
That's
or sometimes I just use
good.
it straight from there. Yeah.
That's a hack right there. So I think on my upcoming interviews for this show, instead of asking them about their article, I'm going to say, are there any interesting things your name spells with the letters rearranged? And we'll just see what they say. If you were a potato, what way would you like to be cooked?
The one I asked Patrick this morning, choose 2 coworkers you'd want on your team during a zombie apocalypse.
Ah, nice.
He chose Aunt Pruitt because you'd have that muscle.
Yeah.
And he chose Burke because Burke could MacGyver some stuff.
Yes, those are great answers.
Yeah.
Solid. Right on. Cool. All right. Well, that's it for me anyways. Thanks to you. Thanks to John. Thanks to Burke, the MacGyver of TWiT. And thanks to you for watching and listening. We'll see y'all next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody. Bow.
Did you spend a lot of money on your brand new smartphone and then you look at the pictures on Facebook and Instagram and you're like, what in the world happened to that photo? Yes. You have. I know. It happens to all of us. Well, you need to check out my show, Hands On Photography, where I'm going to walk you through simple tips and tricks that are going to help make you get the most out of your smartphone camera or your DSLR or mirrorless, whatever you have. And those shots are going to look so much better. I promise you. So make sure you're tuning in to twit.tv/hop for Hands On Photography to find out more.